and welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Mangia. Does Indian steel sector need support? What is the current situation of imports? Is steel being dumped from China? And if yes, what kind of impact will it have on the Indian steel sector? All this and more we're going to discuss today. And why steel sector in India, which employs lakhs of people, why it is important to protect such a sector? Because it's a core sector of our economy. All this and more we reflect. I have a very eminent panel joining me today. Ma'am Aruna Sharma joins us. You see her as a regular feature on the show. Ma'am has served as Secretary Ministry of Steel, of course, Secretary of Communications and IT also she's served, and now a board member. Good to see you, ma'am, and looking forward to some insights. We have with us a sitting member of Parliament of the Rajya Sabha from the Biju Janata Dal, a very vocal face on industry issues, and he's also an advocate at the Supreme Court of India as well. Good to see you, Dr. Patra, and looking forward to some interesting insights from you as well. At the outset, let me request Ma'am Aruna Sharma to give an introductory comment on this topic, an encompassing comment to make us understand what we are going through as a country today, and then we move on to the next question. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So I'll take the lead from what you said, why steel is an important sector. India is a low infra country, and therefore there is a high need of having and accelerating the infrastructure development. And definitely, if we want a longevity, steel is the basic choice. So if we are lucky, we have technology, we are the second largest producer, and we can be self-sufficient in the steel. So therefore, the policies has to be to encourage the sector and to ensure that the local industry flourishes, expands, and goes ahead. So some of the good steps I would like to list out, which has been taken in the recent budget, is definitely that the customs duty has been removed, the 2.5, which was the basic custom duty on the import of ferronickel. And ferronickel is very important for stainless steel to make an alloy. So I think that's a very good step. Then another 25 critical animals also, they have been brought to zero BCT. So that is the customs duty. Then ferrous scrap, which has also been extended to for another 2 years. That is till 31st March 26. And this is very, very important because this is a major import for making of steel from scrap, and which has the lowest carbon emission. And we have centers in Punjab like Mandi Govindgarh or Ludhiana, which are very much dependent on the ferrous scrap, and we are deficit by nearly 7 million tons. Even though we have a scrap policy, we are not self-sufficient on it. And then another good thing which has happened is the financial support for the high-grade steel. In case, there is an innovation and there is something which is happening. So PLI scheme is definitely there. However, whether it gets extended to stainless steel, the clarity is not there. Then the budget has again underlined the focus on infrastructure expansion and housing, which are the major steel consumers. But having said that, the major concern which is happening is even though these strong steps have been taken, the global steel demand has muted and overcapacity is there in China. And I will just give some examples of the numbers, which is a great cause of concern because India, on one hand, we say we have to be make in India. We have the capacity to make that steel. But on another hand, we are going for lesser duty rule, which is very amazing, whereas WTO allows us that if injury is caused to the domestic sector, then we can use anti-dumping or countervailing duty tools, which are quite compliant to the international trade order, and we should go for it. Now, if you look at the numbers, what impact it had, that our imports have gone up to 8.3 million tons last financial year. That is 38% more it has increased. And India has become by 11.5% net importer. 8.3 million tons in 120 million tons may sound very small or minuscule. But if you look at the percentage wise, we are becoming a net importer. Even though the domestic consumption is on rise. So in the sense, the domestic consumption is going up, the imports are going up. And besides China, the worrisome is the FTA what we have with South Korea and Japan. So they are happily importing instead of setting plants in India for the hot rolled coil. So they don't have a blast furnace in India. And Russia has also added into it. So if you look at it, that the imports from them have gone up considerably, even from Russia from April to August. So last financial year, I have given you the figure, and from April to August also, the imports are doubled. So it's like a continued problem even now. So it is a time for a wake up call. Then we take a call on this and see that how these imports can be curtailed. So imports are coming from China-owned Vietnam plants. Imports are coming directly from China. Imports are coming from South Korea and Japan. And imports are also now coming from Russia. There is a process of DGTR which does a thorough inquiry. So it is not that because the manufacturer asking this has to be given. After the thorough inquiry, they find out if the injury is being caused to the domestic sector, and then they recommend. Unfortunately, after undergoing this process, the recommendation of the Steel Ministry, the inquiry by the DGTR, the Finance Ministry has not only not imposed this countervailing duty or the anti-dumping duties, but removed what we had. The resultant has been in stainless steel, the imports have gone up by 117%. And it is in the clue that, okay, cheaper steel is available to the downstream of it. But is it cheaper steel or is it dumping? That is the issue. So is it that the Indian manufacturers are overpricing it, or the import country is underpricing and dumping it? If it is on par, no underpricing, fine. But if it is underpricing by the country which is from where India is importing, then it's a matter of concern. And therefore, it is very, very important that this issue is revisited. And after revisiting, the solution is being found and use these WTO compliant things. And then we have CAMPA also from the Europe, which is going to restrain our exports to that particular country where you will have to pay this extra duty if our carbon emissions are more from their set standards, not the standards what India is working to set for themselves. So you will be hit from both the ends. So overall numbers may be less than 10 million tons of exports or imports. But even then, that is a major concern because we are second largest producer. We have a policy of Make in India. We have to protect them. If there is underpricing imports which are happening in the country, and we have to resort to this. So I think these are my initial comments. I'll stop here.
Thank you for your opening comments, ma'am. I'll take this to Advocate Sasmit Patra, MP of Rajya Sabha from BJD. Dr. Patra, two things here. MD and CEO of Tata Steel, Mr. TV Narendran, said that China is selling steel at a loss, which means companies in India will, in a sense, go bankrupt if they try to compete with China, which has a policy will sell steel to India at a loss. Our companies don't have government support, so they end up, how they will not be able to sustain. In that background, what do you think is happening?
You see, firstly, Tarunji, thank you so much for inviting me to your show, and many thanks to Arunaji for her kind presence. She's a stalwart in the steel industry, having done so much. It's a real pleasure to be with both of you today. You see, as Arunaji so rightly mentioned, and so very articulately, she has placed the challenges that the steel industry in India today faces. I believe the steel industry has been approaching the government on multiple occasions, requesting that there should be higher tariff impositions due to the rising imports from China. One of the critical areas where the steel industry has been requesting the government's intervention has been doubling of tariffs on steel imports from China, which is actually causing a great amount of pain for the Indian steel industry. Right now, we have 7.5% that is actually there as far as duty is concerned in terms of importing the steel. So the steel industry has been requesting that double it to at least 15% in order to protect the Indian steel industry. I was coming across certain media reports where the Honorable Union Minister for Steel, Sri Kumaraswamy, has said on record that yes, there seems to be a very important point being made by the steel industry relating to imposition of higher amount of import duty relating to the steel that is being imported from China. and through Chinese companies that are owned in Vietnam and pushing them into India. And they are looking at something around 10 to 12%. That is what at least he on record says. And he's hoping that the PMO and the finance ministry will look at it. Apart from that, the steel industry has also been advocating for an additional 25% tax on steel imports. Now, just to give you certain numbers, the record that I have for India, for a ton of steel, the total cost stands around 49,000. Whereas for steel coming in from FTA countries comes to 48,900 per ton. Whereas from China, it is 48,400 per ton. So you can see the amount of gap in terms of cheaper steel that is being pushed in. I strongly believe this is a case of dumping, and it is not a clear case of just innocent imports that are really happening. You see, right now, as Arunaji said, that worldwide, there is a slowdown relating to consumption of steel. On the other hand, you have India as the only probable market which is having so much of consumption in steel going on. Now, this makes it for a classical case for countries like China and using its activities through Vietnam to actually push in. That is one area. That's one sector. And the increased imports of rolled steel, if we were to look in April to August 2024, it has risen up to 1.1 million tons, which is about 31.7% more year on year. So you can see this is a 7-year high that we are looking at today in terms of imports. Now, while there is domestic consumption increasing, I think the government and everyone, all of us within this the society, should be trying to protect the Indian industry rather than keeping it open so that we are actually getting somewhere bulldozed by the Chinese imports. That is one. And the second, and then I'll stop, is that, India needs to really focus on how it has to shield the domestic manufacturing, not only of steel, but also stainless steel, that Arunaji said. Many times we do not make the differentiation between stainless steel and steel, but stainless steel is equally important primarily because it is used by the MSME sector. But what is happening is, the temptation of getting cheaper stainless steel from China is going to also create a tremendous amount of adverse impact on the stainless steel producers in the country as well. So I will net, I believe there needs to be FTA reviews for the steel products that are coming in from Korea and Japan. I believe that the government is looking into it considerationally, but I believe they need to do it more. The focus and the target for us should be to target the 300 million tons per annum capacity of steel making. That is something that should be there. Apart from that, I believe that we should initiate some kind of anti-dumping probe into imports that are coming into from China and Vietnam. If we don't do that on a priority basis, while there is an increase in domestic consumption, the Indian manufacturers of steel will not be able to benefit from it.
Point very well taken. Thank you for explaining the issue at hand and also some possible solutions. We go to Ma'am Aruna Sharma. Ma'am, two things here. I remember in our past interview, you had also spoken about the 300 million target, and now new capacities are coming up in Odisha. Two very large steel players are setting up plants. In that phase, with imports rising, do you think that it is time to take strict action? Otherwise, we can't sustain against China, whose capacity is more than the rest of the world's capacity put together. China alone has that much of capacity. If it is being it is being done in a way where geopolitics is involved, where Indian capacities get affected financially, what could be the answer to such a policy of the neighboring state? You're not audible.
Very well said. As Dr. Patra pointed out very, very clearly, that one, we are expanding very well. Second problem is the FTA, which is hitting us very badly because steel is a part of it. And third is that if we are reaching this capacity, even in spite of domestic consumption, it is going to hit us hard. And what you've asked us specifically is, after the NCLT that happened, the expansion of the steel, and today I'm very happy to note that we are on an accelerated path to go to 300 million tons. We are already crossed the half mark, we are beyond it, and the possibility is to reach it by 2030. And the principle which is in the expansion of the steel plant is, after the NCLT episodes, to invest profits plus minimal credit. So in that, if the imports start hitting the company, imports start hitting the reasonable price which is to be given, then definitely it is going to slow down the pace at which this expansion is happening, or new plants are coming up, or new areas are being grown. And it is a must. So therefore, it is equally important that it is not just a protectionist measure, not at all. It is a measure which is fair play measures, that we are not against the imports by any chance. But it is equally important that when you are doing an imports, India is not used as a dumping ground. And as Dr. Patra underlined the stainless steel, for the coastal area, the best material is stainless steel, which is anti-corrosion. For the infrastructure, for the expansion, for the construction, it is equally sturdy, equally good. So with that kind of a consumption going to go up in India, both for steel and stainless steel, definitely it is a concern. And it is very surprising कि बर्तन भांडे बनाने वाला को cheaper steel मिले kind of a concept. And the difference is 10%, and that 10% is because of anti-dumping. There the government can handhold them to give them maybe a little lesser price than what is the market rate coming up. And that is the way to protect, so that you protect the industry, plus also protect the interest of these very tiny, small SMEs or MSMEs which are requiring this steel. Then another concern is the quality of steel that is coming in. Because if the higher nickel content is there, it is harmful if it is used for the food, whether it is retainer or for cooking. So that is also equally important. So when we are looking at it, it is definitely going to have an impact on the accelerated pace in which the expansion is taking place. It will slow it down, and that is a matter of greater concern.
Point well taken. I'll go to Dr. Sasmit Patra here, since you happen to be in Parliament and this is a very important issue. Do you think there should be a national policy on steel where issues like dumping of steel is taken care of in a very specific way? Because on the one hand, government is encouraging steel manufacturers to manufacture setup capacity up to 300 million tons. On the other hand, there are problems exporting now steel to Europe because of safeguard duty there. There are now problems with FTAs, as you mentioned, and then China's selling steel to India less than the price of its manufacturing. So it is like a triple whammy, FTA on one hand, selling at less than cost of production to India at the other, then export hurdles to UK market, UK or the Europe market. All of this, do you think this needs a cohesive approach to help the sector?
Tarunji, you have very rightly mentioned that there is need for a holistic policy. My home state is Odisha. I come from the state of Odisha. I've been a member of parliament for 5 years. And since I have been born in the same state, I have actually seen how the steel industry has grown over the last quarter of a decade, a quarter of a century, in terms of from the grassroots right up to today where it is. And Odisha as a state actually provides and contributes largely to a larger extent to the overall steel production of the country. One thing that actually surprises me is that till today, and this is times that number of times also in the parliament I have spoken about it, on public platforms I've spoken about it, I'm concerned that the steel industry should prosper, because from a political and a parliamentary perspective also, I've seen how state of Odisha has benefited from the increase and emergence of steel as an industry in the state of Odisha. And therefore, it is extremely important that today, nationally, we need to have a consensus. We have to have a view. We cannot work in pieces. We cannot work in silos. For example, I'd like to draw your attention, a few days back, Honorable Union Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal had mentioned about border adjustment tax. Or for that matter, what we're talking this time is about the carbon tax that the Europe is trying to impose on us. So these are certain areas where we have to come together beyond party lines. And we have to find a consensus, because this is about employment. This is about economic development. It's about economic value added. We are trying to become a $5 trillion economy. One of the main engine drivers to this entire process is going to be the steel industry. And given that it has got not only employment from the mines and minerals sector, but there are many ancillary MSME downstream industries that also survive primarily because of the steel industry. So therefore, there needs to be consensus relating to FTAs and how we approach them. There needs to be consensus in terms that we must look down on anti-dumping and call out anti-dumping as anti-dumping. We should not become shy of calling something as dumping because we'll be seen as protectionist. This is not protectionism. If you're wanting to protect your industry from such shark-like behavior from China and Vietnam imports, then I think we are doing a service for the nation. And thirdly, relating to various challenges that we are facing, I think there is this misnomer that steel industry being very big, therefore, it's like a big, entity in itself and therefore doesn't need handholding. I think steel industry today needs more handholding given the global headwinds that it is actually facing today, more than ever. And while domestic production is peaking up, if the Indian steel industry cannot make the best efforts and best investments right now, then when will it? If tomorrow we go into a cycle of slowdown, after that, would you ask the steel industry to make good of it? No, now is the time. So now is the time when the sun is shining on the Indian consumption and the Indian domestic market. We should make good rather than allow dumping to come from China and any such other countries that are associated with it.
Thank you for that very well-reasoned and strong comment, Dr. Patra. We'll take one final comment from Ma'am Aruna Sharma on this issue.
Yes, I'm really thankful that the parliamentarian Dr. Patra has been so conscious about it. And in 300 million tons also, his state is going to contribute 1/3, 100 million tons. So that is going to be the scenario. So Odisha is going to be very, very important state into the entire process. So when we are looking at this kind of an expansion, the policy has to be holistic. You can't say that, okay, on this policy you are running, this policy I put the chain your feet, and then with this I try to get a hurdle for you. So this is not going to happen for any sector, and especially the steel and stainless steel. It is very, very important that everything has to facilitate that growth. And we are capable technology-wise, we are capable investment-wise. We have come out of that cycle of, the bad times and the good times, being a cyclical thing. We will continue to grow. And when we will continue to grow, very rightly pointed out by Dr. Patra, that this is the time we should not create impediments into the entire process. Because it comes like a shocker. When the entire industry is preparing to run, there is suddenly these hurdles which comes as a shocker. So therefore, it is very important that it is well thought out. And one thing I would like to make a mention, that there has been a Supreme Court judgment in which they have mentioned that finance ministry cannot take an ad hoc decision unless until it is well argued. When DGTR has recommended, the line ministries are recommending, and suddenly you find in the budget, it's not even discussed. It comes as a surprise or as a hit in the budget. So these things should be avoided, and it has to be well argued if there is another point of view to the DGTR findings. Because DGTR is a third party, the findings are different, the findings are very systematic, and it has to be honored.
So point very well taken. Thank you for this input. It was indeed a good show where we took out some relevant issues, mainly on how to counter and what is the legal solution to stop dumping from China. That said, we are not averse to imports, but if steel is being dumped into India less than the cost of production, our industry has no way that it can save itself from global capacities and government support to dump into India. I think a solution can be found. We had two people who understand this well, and they shared with us. In the next show on this, we will delve into what has been done and what could be done. That would be a fortnight from now, but we will keep, because this sector, which is a core sector, involves all of us, and that is why steel is something that should be discussed often. I would like to thank Ma'am Aruna Sharma, Advocate Sasmit Patra, MP Rajya Sabha, for making time and joining us. Appreciate the viewers for watching the show. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.